But one of the problems, is I have with school, the school system. In school, they teach you to be the rugged individual. Do it on your own, stand alone, be a man or be an individual. And so these people go out in the business world and everybody stomps on them. The corporate world stomps on them, the government stomps on them. So people go out, they say, well, I'm going to be a rugged individual. They quit their corporate job or government job. They become a self-employed entrepreneur, and the world just stomps on them like a big Tyrannosaurus Rex, stomps on them. But they're being the rugged individual. Look, I don't do it that way. When I was a little boy, I learned really early. My poor dad was a school teacher. He always tried to solve his problems on his own, especially his financial problems. And my father was a good man, a school teacher, but he knew nothing about money. So how can he solve his problems? By himself. And my rich dad was a man who never went to school, but he solved the problems the way that real business people solve problems. He always had a team. He had his banker, his accountant, his attorney, and all this. And then I go home to see my poor dad, a school teacher, a very smart man, but poor. And I'd see him sitting on the table struggling to pay his bills. What a foolish idea. So today, so that I go back to school and I would try and solve my test problems with my team, but the teacher called that cheating. So that's hard to understand why my poor dad was poor. He tried to solve his problems as the rugged individual, John Wayne, he's going to take on the whole world. He can't even pay his bills, but he's going to take on the whole world. He doesn't know how to solve his problems. So today what you're going to be hearing from are three of my advisors. And these advisors are my team. They are, I would say, 95% of the reason Kim and I are rich today. It's not because Kim and I are smart or successful, but we hang out with people who are smart and successful. And it's another reason for you to listen to the Rich Dad radio show. You hear from people who are smart and successful, not people who are salespeople like financial planners. Most financial planners don't make $40,000 a year, and they're telling you how to run their lives. Well, before they become your financial planner or stockbroker or real estate broker, pull their financials. Ask them for a financial statement. If they don't have a financial statement, I think you better get another advisor. If they're ashamed to show you how much they make, you better get somebody else because they're going to pollute the most important asset you got is your brain. Any comments, Kim?
The one thing in what you're talking about, Robert, is in school, we are taught to do it on our own. We're taught to do it on our own. And we come out of school thinking, we have to have all the right answers. We have to do it all on our own. We can't ask for help. And in the world of entrepreneurship, it's totally opposite.
No, in school, what I do is called cheating, and in our world, it's called collaboration, right?
Right. That's exactly right. And if you collaborate in school, you get an F. So the school really does it's totally opposite of what to succeed in school as to succeed as an entrepreneur. So three of our advisors are going to be with us today. And, many people say, what's a Rich Dad advisor? Well, we have a very small assortment. We have 7 Rich Dad advisors because I just want to make a point. A lot of people come up and say, oh, yes, I'm a Rich Dad advisor. Our advisors are people that advise us on a regular basis. They all have books that are published under Rich Dad, and they practice what they preach every single day. So they're a wealth of information, and that's who we're going to talk to
today.
So
if you go to a seminar or something and somebody says they're a Rich Dad advisor, ask them for one thing. Show me your book. It's called a Rich Dad Advisor book. So if anybody's claiming to be an advisor and they don't have a book, stand up and throw your book at them or something, okay? So today we have 3 advisors. You guys are essential to my team. Number 1 is Blair Singer. He's Rich Dad Advisors, has been my friend for years and years and years, almost 40 years now.
He goes back before me.
Yep. Blair and I were boyfriends. No, we were boyfriends.
Right.
And we also have Tom Wheelwright. He's our advisor on taxes. I hear so many people complaining about taxes. I say, why don't you talk to Tom? No. So they pay their stupid taxes. I mean, really, really silly. And also have Andy Tanner. For those of you who like stocks and bonds and paper assets, he's your guy. I personally don't care for them because I like real estate and business much more.
But what Andy does, too, is he teaches you how to get cash flow from
stocks,
paper assets, which most people don't do.
Yeah. They teach you to invest for the long term and lose it all. Anyway.
No, they lose it to them.
I know. Yeah. What should I do with my money? Well, give it to
me. I'll take care of it.
I'm a financial planner. I'm a real estate agent. Man, I some of the most pathetic people, reason they're called brokers is because they're broker than you are. So anyway, today is my dear friend Blair Singer. He's RichDad Advisor. He's the author of Little Voice Mastery, Sales Dogs, and his website is salesdogs.com and blairsinger.com. So welcome to the program, Blair.
Well, it's great to be here, man. It's great to always be on the show with the other advisors.
Every one of my advisors, they all came about because of a bad deal. In other words, the saying we have is you can't do a good deal with a bad partner, but every bad deal I found good partners. So Blair and I became friends over a bad deal with a friend named Danny. And Danny's a great guy, but he was functionally incompetent.
You're right. He was a good salesman. He was a good hustler, but a horrible business person.
Yeah, he was a good salesman. So anyway, Blair, you talk about the number one skill of an entrepreneur, but really I think it's the number one skill in life.
Yeah, absolutely.
You call it sales, but my old man, my poor dad said, salesmen are scum, and that's why he couldn't sell. But what happens if a person can't sell, Blair?
Well, if they can't sell, there's no income. It's real simple. I mean, if sales equals income, if you can't describe what you have, explain the benefits of it, if you can't talk to other people, you can't sell, there's no income, no resources, no investors. You can't even recruit people to be on your team unless you can provide a compelling reason why they want to work for you and be motivated. So you're right, Robert. It's not just a business skill; it's a life skill. So people that are lonely and home alone because they can't sell.
So why do people think that sales is bad, or why are they afraid of selling? Where does that come from?
The number one thing that stops anybody from creating wealth is your concern about what other people think about you.
So Blair, you talked about people who are lonely, and there's a story I always tell. Is I went to see my rich dad. In 1973, I came back from the Marine Corps, and I said to my rich dad, I want to be an entrepreneur. And he says, well, you got to learn how to sell. And I said, I don't want to learn how to sell. I said, salesmen are scum. I was just repeating my poor dad's attitude, school teacher's attitude towards sales.
Right.
And he really hated sales. My poor dad said, he's a used car salesman. He sells shoes, stuff like this. And he looked down upon salespeople because he has a PhD. So my rich dad said, well, you have to learn how to sell. And I no. And finally, rich dad said, how's your sex life? And I said, I don't have one. He says, because you can't sell. So that's when I decided I'd better learn how to sell, and I went to work for Xerox. But Blair, the thing I want to talk to you today about is this, okay? You said it best, and the reason you have your book, The Little Voice Mastery, is the most important sales job you have to do is a sales job on you, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
If you cannot control your little voice when it's going, I don't need to do that. She's going to reject me anyway. Men are all pigs. You can't control that. You've had it, right?
That's right. I mean, it starts from the minute you say, I want to get in better shape, and you're arguing with yourself about getting out of bed in the morning. I'm too tired. I can't do it. You've got to be able to sell yourself, to be able to do the things that you need to be able to do just in life, let alone generating income.
And how do you do that? So let's say I want to go lose 5 pounds, which I don't want to do, but if I had to, and my voice is saying, no, I don't want to get out of bed. No, I don't want to go to the gym. A lot of times I just don't want to go to the gym because I go to the gym a lot and I don't want to exercise and I'm tired. How do you overcome that? How do you handle that little voice?
Well, the first thing is you got to put enough weight on what you want to make it worthwhile for yourself. I mean, if I were trying to get Robert to climb Kilimanjaro, that ain't going to happen because he doesn't want to go there. But if you want, but to be in better shape or to go look at a bunch of deals, and there's got to be enough weight on it that makes you want to do it. Then once you've got that,
so you got to find that reason why you want to do it. You got to find that
big time. You got to have a good reason why. Otherwise, you're not going to do it. The second thing is then you got to talk to yourself. You got to talk yourself through it. I can do this. I got this. Affirmations or just overriding the little voice in your head enough times until you start reprogramming it a little bit.
And I do that. Kim knows I do it every single day.
You do every morning. We do it every morning.
Every single morning. Kim and I work. We had him on our program. Hal Elrod. It's called Miracle Morning. I do it every single morning because I got to beat that little voice in my head.
That's it. There's a little voice going on in your head anyway. So the question is, are you going to make a choice of what it's going to say, or are you just going to let it go on autopilot? And most people, it's easier to go on autopilot. But the discipline is saying, I got this, I can do this, I can do this. Whatever you got to do to talk yourself through it, and if you do it enough times, then it becomes a habit. Then you can move to the next level. But the first most important sale of all is selling you to yourself. because most people won't do it.
So now I'm at that point, and I want to learn and I'm determined to be a good salesperson. I'm going to do it. What do I need? What's happening today? What do I need to know? What do listeners need to know about sales today in this environment?
Well, what you need to know about sales today in this environment is it's not as difficult as everybody thinks it is. I tell people right now, if you just get back in the game, go out, talk to your customers, and just ask tons of questions. Find out what they're doing. Find out what they want. Everybody assumes they know what they want. The customer wants, they don't.
So it begins with it begins with asking questions, not just telling. Telling is not selling.
Exactly.
And I meet the worst salesmen of all. They always want to tell, but they don't ask.
That's right.
So
and I tell people, if you're in a slump right now, take your 5 best customers, take them to lunch, go just ask them a barrage of questions. Why do they like doing it? What's it been like before? What was it like after? Tell me more. How can I help? Just question for question. And you know what? A, you'll generate business from that customer if they like you, number one. Number two, you'll learn more about the market than sitting behind your laptop and trying to be a sky pilot, trying to figure it out on your own. And you're engaged in the most important part of the selling process, which is asking people what they want so you can give it to them.
That's fantastic advice, Blair. Thanks very much. You're on your way to Kilimanjaro, so have
good
a
luck.
good climb.
How many times have you done this?
I'll send you a photo from the top.
How many times have you done Kilimanjaro?
This will be my 4th trip.
So I'm assuming.
Why?
And I'm assuming you have to keep selling yourself, and people that climb with you have to keep selling themselves and doing it every single step of the way, right?
Look, it's like entrepreneurship. It's one step at a time, one breath at a time. Don't worry about the summit. Just do the work, do what you need to do, and sooner or later you find yourself there. That's the key.
Again, as we said at the start of the program, is my poor dad attempted to solve his financial problems on his own, and my rich dad solved his problems with a team of people that were smarter than him. And one of the things I've noticed about life, the most successful people hang out with people smarter than them. And the most stupid people, or the least successful, the ones who are limited success, have to be the boss. They have to know more than everybody else, which is a very limiting factor because you're not God. You know what I mean? You think, I know it all. You don't know it all, and you need feedback and all this. So this program's important because you're listening to my advisor. These are our real advisors. And once again, if anybody says they're Robert Kiyosaki's advisor, ask them one question. Show me your book. Because every advisor here has a Rich Dad Advisor book. And our next guest is Tom Wheelwright. He is our advisor on taxes. And I think that's one of the funniest subjects of all. Taxes really infuriate people, don't they?
Oh, yeah. Well, the only thing people think about is taxes is how much taxes they're going to have to pay. I mean, we've had well before Tom some bad advisors, and I hated sitting down with them.
CPAs,
and I'd sit down with them, and all they would tell me is, "This is how much tax you're going to pay." There was no strategy, there was no planning, there was no how do we make this less? How do we reduce your taxes? None of that. So I think people just think taxes as this big evil thing hanging over their head.
And I was talking to a government official yesterday, and he was complaining about government taxes, and I said, "Well, it's real simple. I don't pay them."
He went crazy.
He went nuts, because he's running for political offices. Well, how can you not pay taxes? And I showed him an article about Elon Musk, of Tesla and PayPal and Solar City and SpaceX. And I said, this is how Elon doesn't pay taxes. It's the same way. He says the title said Elon Musk Subsidy King. In other words, every government is offering Elon tax credits, tax breaks, tax subsidies. And this government official, smart young guy, he went nuts. Why? Because he's a highly educated government official like my poor dad.
And he doesn't understand taxes like our advisor, Tom Wheelwright.
And he's not an entrepreneur.
Right.
Because if you're an employee, you have to pay those taxes. But if you're an entrepreneur, the way Tom guided us to become better entrepreneurs is we don't pay tax legally. So here we have Tom Wheelwright. When you ask him for his book, it's a Rich Dad book called Tax-Free Wealth.
And Tom is the founder and CEO of Provision. So welcome, Tom.
Great. Thanks for having me. It's always fun being on these shows.
So is it possible, Tom, for ordinary private citizens to pay maybe not zero tax, but pay less and less tax?
No question. Anybody who is either an entrepreneur or an investor, if we look at the cash flow quadrant, they're on the B and the I side, they can get to zero or at least down to
you better explain
20%.
Yeah, you better explain cash flow quadrant.
Okay, so cash flow quadrant in the book, Cash Flow Quadrant.
It's a Rich Dad book.
The Rich Dad book, Robert's second book. There are 4 quadrants that 4 ways to earn money. You can be an employee, you can be self-employed, you can be a business owner, or an investor.
And who pays the highest taxes?
The self-employed.
The small business guy.
Small business guy, they pay the highest taxes.
I have to laugh because a government official was so upset that the small business guys paid the highest taxes. I said, well, you're the guys that tax them. But the government official doesn't know why the self-employed pay the highest taxes.
Once you start thinking about what the tax law really is, which is a series of incentives for business owners and investors, you can make it work for you. But the problem with your government official is he's thinking like an employee, and an employee thinks, well, the more I work, the more money I make, and that's not the way the government thinks. The government actually thinks the less I work, the more I employ others and other people's money, the less taxes I pay.
Right, and this government official, on top of that, he works really hard and he saves money. What's wrong with saving money?
Well, you pay taxes at your highest rates on saving money. That's why.
Yeah.
So let me ask
Wait, this guy was ballistic. He was ballistic yesterday.
Well, he had a certain mindset. He had a certain mindset. So let me ask you this time. So we have a dear friend. He's a doctor, and he was kind of bemoaning all the taxes that he's paying, and he's an employee of a hospital, and this and that, and all of a sudden I said, but isn't he looking at starting a part-time business on the side of doing his consulting on the side? And his fiance said yes, he is, and I'm like, well, there's huge tax breaks there for him, and she's like, there are. So is that true? If you're an employee, you could start just a part-time business and get benefits?
No question. So when we say that the self-employed pay the highest taxes, we're really talking about lawyers and accountants and architects, people who really sell their services for a living. The small business owner, if they do a good strategy, have a good plan of action, they can get their taxes way down. So it applies. The tax law applies equally to the rich and the poor. It just applies differently between the I sell my time for money and I don't sell my time for money. I mean, those are the two differences.
I talk to so many people who just keep working hard and saving money and putting in a 401k. What's wrong with that strategy?
Well, they're planning to retire poor. That's what's wrong with that strategy, because that strategy only works if you make less money. If you're going to have less money when you retire than you are when you work, and I don't know anybody that really wants to just not sleep under a bridge. I mean, they if you want to just get by, that's fine. You're postponing taxes to a lower bracket, but if you want to have a good income when you retire, you're really pushing yourself into a higher tax bracket.
Well, worst of all, by being an employee, saving money, and putting in a 401k, the government's sucking taxes off you on all 3 steps, aren't they?
Well, they are. They suck it when you get paid, and then they suck it when you get your retirement money. So that and they suck. It's like a giant vacuum.
Suck.
Once again, Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. Today we're talking 3 of the Rich Dad Advisors, and these are our real advisors. If you ever meet a guy named Tom Wheelwright, CPA, great guy, and he is the author of Tax-Free Wealth, say, Tom, are you really a Rich Dad Advisor? Show me your book, and his book would be Tax-Free Wealth. And for those of you out there who are sick and tired of working hard, saving money, and losing money by putting in a 401k, I would get Tom's book, Tax-Free Wealth, and then contact him. His website is provisionwealth.com. So, Tom, this is my big question to you. Are there changes in the tax law coming up?
Well, yeah, for sure. No question. In fact, there will be changes this year, because you might remember that at the end of last year, Congress did this stupid thing that they keep doing, which is they extended, certain tax benefits, but they only extended them through the end of last year. They didn't extend them to this year. So we will have some kind of a tax bill this year. Hopefully they will, at least extend. They keep talking about making these tax benefits permanent. These are all tax benefits, by the way, that are for entrepreneurs and investors. They're not tax benefits for the employee. They're tax benefits for entrepreneurs and investors.
So
they will happen.
So what do our listeners need to be aware of?
Well,
what do they need to be looking out for?
What they need to look out for, it will be called an extenders bill. That's what it will be called. So that's what they're looking for, and that's what their CPA should be letting them know is coming down the road. But the other thing is I'd be looking at the candidates for Congress next year, and what are they talking about as far as taxes go? Because I think that the new president, whoever that is, will have a different agenda than this current president, and we will see. I think we're likely to see some significant changes to the tax law with a new president.
So let me explain the way that I work with Tom, and then I'll say it again. The purpose of the show is that my poor dad always tried to figure out his financial problems on his own. He tried and do his taxes on his own. What an idiot. And then my rich dad always had his team of advisors. So my team of advisors. So what Tom does is he's paying attention to all these changes coming through Congress. And if something changes, Tom will then adjust our strategies so that, again, we don't pay that much in tax. Right, Tom?
No, that's exactly right. So right now, people are wondering, what do I do, for taxes? And, what I would say is this is the time to sit down with your tax advisor, do a mid-year assessment, look at where you are, look at what your strategy is, look at what's coming down the road, and now's the time to plan. And December is too late.
So let me ask you this, Tom. If I'm an employee with a W-2, does it do any good to sit down with a tax advisor?
You know what? I think it does from the standpoint you ought to look at, okay, if there's nothing I can do, then what can I do differently in my life? So what I might be able to do differently in my life is put my money somewhere else. And instead of putting in that 401k, can I put it into real estate, oil and gas, something else? Can I do something that will reduce my tax and increase my wealth?
But the problem that Kim and I had, and these were some of the big 8 accounting firm guys, they were complete idiots. They were village idiots. They knew nothing about investing.
They told us to get out of real estate and put our money in the stock marte, mutual funds specifically.
I would not.
And this was Arthur Anderson. They're out of business now for a good reason. Just because they're idiots.
And I'm going to tell you one thing you could do before sitting down with your tax advisor, if you have one, is read Tom's book, Tax-Free Wealth, because in there's going to be a lot of questions that you could ask your advisor or whoever you're working with to reduce your taxes.
No, that's a really good idea. And Rich Dad Poor Dad, what makes it such a fabulous book is that it shifts your context, the way you think about things and the way you think about money. Well, that's the reason to read Tax-Free Wealth, because think differently about taxes. Don't think of them as the enemy. Think of them as your friend. And think about how can you make them your friends, and then you can win.
Think of Elon Musk. He got $50 billion or $5 billion in tax breaks, and he's a rich man. So Kim and I do the same thing. I was talking to this government official, an employee. He went nuts. He went crazy. And we had Blair Singer on just recently. This employee's little voice fired off. He says, "You guys are crooks. You're cheating everybody." I said, "Look, I want you to look at it another way. The people who get tax breaks are partners with the government."
Right.
Elon Musk is doing what the government wants done. Kim and I are doing what the government wants done. We are partners with the government, so we get tax breaks. Employees and self-employed or small business guys are not partners with the government. Is that true, Tom?
Well, it's right. And it's like you say, Robert, the more generous you are, the more benefits you get.
And the more people we serve,
Right. The more people you serve and the more generous you are. So if you go serve more people by building more rental properties, you get more tax breaks. If you employ more people, you get more tax breaks. It's the people that are very conservative and just do things for themselves, the employees, they're the ones who get hammered.
So that's why, I ask people, when you talk to a financial planner, real estate broker, stockbroker, ask them for their financial statement. And if they don't have one, run. Run, because they're going to give you financial advice that's bad. And that includes people who are like CPAs and lawyers. Most of those guys don't make much money. They pay high taxes, and they're not investors. They invest in 401ks. So that's why the 3 people we had, Blair Singer, the little voice mastery, the biggest voice you got to master, the biggest sales job you got to make is on yourself. Because I can hear some of you saying, I'll never be rich, what's good for you, but you don't know how hard my life is. I can hear it, because I have the same garbage going on in my head. And second is Tom Wheelwright. He's a RichDad Advisor on taxes. His book is Tax-Free Wealth. And he is the reason Kim and I make a lot of money and pay less taxes. And as I said earlier, is that the people who pay the least taxes are partners with the government. That's why Elon Musk, I think, got $5 billion in tax breaks. Kim and I don't get that much, but we get millions in tax breaks.
And this is why this show is important, because these are our advisors. We're kind of behind the scenes now. You're hearing the conversations we have with them on a regular basis, and they do advise us, and they do practice what they preach, and they live, breathe, sleep this every day.
Yeah, and once again, there's a lot of people that they're claiming to be my advisor, our advisors. if somebody says they are, just ask them I want to see your book that says Rich Dad Advisor on it. That's the best test you can have. So our last and final guest is a great friend, Andy Tanner. He's a Rich Dad Advisor. And it's for all of you people out there who have a 401k, because some financial planner or your boss or your company told you a 401k is good and mutual funds are safe, guaranteed to wealth. So for those of you who listen to those guys with no financial education, here's Andy Tanner. So Andy,
Andy.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys. It's
Andy,
good to hear your voice. Good to be with you.
What do you say with somebody who thinks they're going to retire with a 401k?
And I got to say, you're also the author of the book 401 Chaos. So what is that about?
Well, concerning Robert's question about people have a 401k, it's great if you live in Colorado because you can smoke that high-grade marijuana.
And you're a Mormon. You shouldn't say that.
Can we say that on the radio?
Yes, you can.
Even I don't do that stuff, man.
It's a tough place to be, in my opinion, for a lot of people. There might be a few very high money earners that you might have some future with it. I think the toughest part is, the storm clouds are out there and they are not hard to see. What's going to happen is not hard to define. When it's happened, a little tougher. You've been bold in your predictions. But the biggest problem I'd have if I was sitting in a 401k, I was worried about not having control, right? Where I have to sit and I have to hope something works out rather than being able to force my will, to be able to make my own future. I have to hope my future works out rather than creating it.
Because it's in somebody else's hands and it's in the stock market.
And the worst thing about it is the reason people are poor is they make it so easy to have a 401k.
Yep.
You just walk into your HR, human resource director, check a couple of boxes, and you walk out and you think you're protected for your life.
Yeah,
all 401k is a tax. It's one more tax on your life, right, Andy?
It's automatic enrollment. There's legislation now that says you show up, and talk about easy. It's not. It isn't that you sign up and do it. It's that you have to sign up to get out. You have to go in and say,
opt out.
It's
called.
Do it. It's the default setting, and it's a mechanism. If you look at both sides of the coin, certainly Wall Street isn't getting hurt by collecting a portion of your paycheck like clockwork and charging you fees on that.
That's why
whether the market goes up or down.
It's a tax.
They have control, you don't.
And what advice do you have for people in a 401k? I'm sitting here with a 401k. What do I do?
Education. A lot of people will say, should I get out? Should I get out?
We hear that a lot.
That's going from the frying pan into the fire.
Yeah, we don't recommend getting out of your 401k. I would just recommend you start, as Andy said, start learning something.
What are some other alternatives? What are some other ways to invest in paper or business or real estate or commodities?
So Andy's book is called Stock Market Cash Flow. You see, most people should not do what Kim and I do. They really shouldn't be entrepreneurs, and they really should not invest in real estate. It is not liquid. It's high risk. It takes immense dedication to make it. As Wheelwright Tom Wheelwright talked about ESB and the I, to make it to the B and I is probably 1 in 10,000 will make it. But you can't do what Andy does, and that's why his book is called Stock Market Cash Flow, because you don't really have to be that good an entrepreneur to do what you do, right, Andy?
Yeah, there are similar principles, and there's a similar context, I think, that are across all the asset classes from context. But I think you talk about salesmanship and how important that is. The liquidity of the market makes it so I can buy things and sell things without having to negotiate or advertise or market or get public PR. So there are some advantages, and there's also disadvantages. Anyone in any asset class, I think we can find successful people. Trump's done well in real estate. Buffett's done well in the stock market. You can also find a lot of carnage and a lot of people that have failed in those. And the difference is their context and the level of their education and how committed they are to driving their own ship rather than having someone else drive it.
Yeah, once again, Robert Kiyosaki.
Pretty sure Buffett doesn't have a 401k. I'm pretty sure of that.
Once again, it's Robert Kiyosaki, the Rich Dad Radio Show. We're talking to my advisors. Kim is our advisors. These are real advisors. We have Blair Singer, Tom Wheelwright, and Andy Tanner. Right now we're talking about, for those of you who have a 401k, I would definitely say being screwed. And the reason is called fees, that the Wall Street wins whether you lose. They don't really care about your money because they're going to win the moment you sign up for it. So we're talking to Andy. I mean, what can a person do to have cash flow from the stock market?
Well, it's the same thing that happens with rent, and it's the same thing that happens with business. You need to learn how to sell. When you rent a house, you're selling a contract to that person that says, I'll let you have some time in my house if you'll compensate me. When you sell a product, you're selling. And most people in the stock market don't know how to sell things like an option or how to be a true business owner. Of course, there's dividends, but those are pretty small return for what you put in. So the guys like Buffett, the way he makes billions is he sells contracts. He sells paper contracts. And these can get a little bit more complex. This isn't for someone to, hop right into without some knowledge and some background. But that's really, Buffett makes billions a year by selling contracts in the same way a real estate investor sells contracts for leases and rent. It's very, very similar.
So it's a matter of, same in real estate, it's a matter of getting some education behind you, and then you take small steps and you practice, right?
Huge.
Okay.
And the big difference is if I'm going to go into business and sell, I'm going to have to advertise, I'm going to have to give a sales pitch, or at least have a good brand or marketing at the least. Where in assets, in paper, they're generally liquid. And if I want to sell something, it sounds crazy. It almost sounds unbelievable that I could click a button, someone would buy something from me and deposit money in my account for new cash flow. That's new cash flow that month.
What Andy is talking about here is you're talking about options, aren't you?
Yes, I am.
So what you do is, let's say you have 100 shares of Netflix, which will now be worth 700 shares. But anyway, you can just rent your shares, basically.
Hey, I'm going to give someone the option to buy something. If I buy my stock at $100 and I'd feel comfortable with selling it at $110, why not make that $10? Well, I can get paid. The neat thing is whether the stock goes up or down, I would keep that premium. So up or down, it wouldn't matter. This is how Warren Buffett acquires stock. I can also sell a contract for something I want to buy. Right now, Robert, I've been building not to be too personal, but I've been building a little position on some oil contracts. I feel oil's pretty low right now. I don't know when it'll go up, but what I've done is I've said, look, I want to buy oil, maybe an ETF equivalent at $20. And I'll get 50 cents per share, 75 cents per share, depending, to do what I was going to do anyway. So since December, I've been able to build this position in the oil market. And even though oil's been pretty much stagnant since December, it kind of found a bottom there and it's varied a little bit, but the big drop has stopped. I've actually profitable in getting paid to buy an asset that I was going to buy anyway. So I'm cash flowing that while building a position. And then if oil goes up, great. Then I can get a capital gain if I want it. Very much the same feeling as you're going to rent a house. And if the price of house goes up and someone makes you an offer you can't refuse, well, great. Then maybe you flip it. But that's not going to be your bread and butter. Your bread and butter is your cash flow, if that makes sense.
Well, what he's saying that instead of buying a piece of property, you buy some shares and you rent your shares. You give them the option to buy your shares, and they pay you. Let's say your stock is worth $10. You'll sell them a $1 option that if it hits $12, you'll sell it to them for $12.
A way someone might think of it is that time.
But the point is, you get that $1.
Yeah.
See, what you're going for is not the price of the stock. You're going for the rent of the stock.
You bet.
And that's called stock market cash flow, which is you describe. So
That's
that means
exactly
your risk goes down, but your cash flow goes up. Right?
100%. Yep, that's exactly right.
And so isn't that better than, if with some education, than sitting with a 401k, by holding and praying that if the stock market crashes, you're wiped out? That's ridiculous, isn't it?
It really is. And again, there's a huge lack of control. We mentioned that 401k.
And let me say one more thing that Tom mentioned, Tom Wheelwright, our CPA. If you have a 401k and you make money in a 401k, you pay higher taxes than what Andy is doing, because 401ks are taxed, and this is true all over the world, at different tax rates than people who are professional investors like Andy. So 401k is a double loser, because you lose from fees, you lose if the market crashes, and you lose when you redeem them for taxes.
And can't you also pay taxes even if you lose money in your 401k?
It's possible to do that. And even in an IRA with mutual funds, a mutual fund company will build that in if there's a tax loss in the mutual fund. It's pretty crazy. You know, Tom talks a little bit about it in his book, and yet a person with a Roth IRA, if they're doing this with a Roth IRA, all that cash flow is tax-free, all of it, 100% of it.
Is that good or bad?
I
That's
think it's good.
Tax-free is good. We like tax-free.
I know. But the trouble, anyway, Andy, I want to thank you very much. And then what do you see coming up in the stock market real quick? Is it getting toppy?
You know, it looks like we're slowing momentum. It can always get another boost depending on policy. I think the thing I would tell people is this: don't take in everybody's predictions. Take in preparations. In other words, if Robert Kiyosaki says, hey, I think this thing's coming down in 2016, you don't necessarily need to agree with him. But what you do need to say is, could this happen? I would take in 2015 and 2016, the attitude I would take is the same as your home insurance. Look, maybe you don't think your house is going to burn down, but shouldn't you insure it just in case it does? So get away from predictions and get some preparations. If you don't agree with someone who says it's falling, well, that's fine if you don't think it's probable, but is it possible? And is there enough evidence to suggest some preparation to the downside? That's what I have to say.
Good advice, Andy. Thank you.
So once again, it's Andy Tanner. He's a RichDad Advisor. His book is 401 Chaos and Stock Market Cash Flow. His website is andytanner.com. And what this show is really about is that my poor dad, being a school teacher, a PhD, he solved all of his financial problems on his own. And my rich dad, who never went to school, you know, he solved his problems by hanging around with very smart people, like his bankers, his accountants, his attorneys, all of his team members here. So it's a very important question to ask yourself right now: who do you get advice from? I'm not saying they're bad people, but most financial planners don't make more than $50,000 a year. Why would you take advice from them? Do you know? And you walk into your company, and as Andy Tanner says, you know, you just sign up for a 401k. Well, who in the world's advising you there? You know, or you save money and then you pay the highest taxes because you're either in savings or you're working hard or you have a 401k. So that's why we have Andy Tanner, who is an expert on paper assets, how you can get cash flow rather than get cash ripped off. We have Tom Wheelwright, his rich dad. He's a CPA, RichDad Advisor. His provisionwealth.com. His book is Tax Free Wealth. And if you like paying taxes, don't read his book. But you want to pay less taxes, read his book. Another person is Blair Singer. He's the author of Sales Dogs. That's his Rich Dad Advisor book. But he's also the book Little Voice Mastery. Because the biggest sales job you got to do right now is on yourself. If you said, oh, it's too much trouble, you know, I don't want to do that, oh, the rich are a bunch of crooks, you just sold yourself out of everything. Okay, what do you want to say?
Well, here's what I want to say is I get this question a lot, and one of the questions is, you know, how do I start with a team? Should I build my team first, and then should I start my business? And I'm going to say, we have worked, Robert, you and I, many, many years to put together our team of advisors, and we've gone through a lot of bad advisors to find good advisors, and also
some real schmucks too, boy.
Real schmucks, yes. And we've also, you know, we can only take advisors up to the level of knowledge that we have. So as our business grows, we need smarter and smarter advisors. So it's not something that happens overnight. It takes time, and you're going to go through bad ones. You're going to kiss some frogs to find the princes, but
what
it's
Kim
a process
is saying,
that needs to happen.
What Kim is saying, when you get smarter than your advisors, you better
You're in
move
trouble.
on and find a new one.
That's a really good point.
You know, because
that
there's
happens.
some real. Like I was talking to Tom Wheelwright. You know, some of the worst tax advice we got from Arthur Anderson. Those guys were horrible. Horrible. I'm
they
glad they're out of business right now.
Yeah, or you get
bad
attached.
advice.
Or you get attached to your advisor. Oh, they're such a nice
Yeah, we've
person.
been
They're such
friends
a
for
good
years.
friend. I don't
Yeah.
want to leave them. Sometimes you got to cut and move on.
Yeah. Otherwise, they hold you down, or you know, you should always be not as smart as your advisors.
Yes.
So you can submit your questions to Ask Robert at richdadradio.com. So Melissa, what's the first question?
Our first question today comes from Courtney in Omaha, Nebraska. Favorite book, Midas Touch. She says, Robert, when do you know you have a bad partner? How can you tell before it's too late? And vice versa. How can you tell early on if you have a good partner?
Great question.
Well, think of it this way, because it's a more common experience having business partners. You know, when you're married and one day you get this bad feeling in your stomach, you go, I think he's cheating on me or she's cheating on me. Oh, my God, I'm checking somebody else out more than her or him, you know. It's, you know, in your gut first, because science has proven there is more intelligence in your gut. There's actually things called receptors in your stomach area that are as intelligent as your brain. That's where you get this gut feeling. So for Kim and I, everything was going around well in the Rich Dad company for about 3 to 4 years. And then one day I woke up and my stomach started going bad. And it took me a long time and a lawsuit later to figure it all out. So the point here is this: partnership and relationships are either the best or the worst. There's no in between, really. So like today, we're going to celebrate, this is the 3rd anniversary of the Rich Dad radio show. And this is a real example. Our first partners in the show, thank God they're not here, it was a horrible feeling. Every day, Kim and I would come in and do this show, and we hated it.
Well, they had their own agenda. We were not aligned on what we were doing.
Yeah, they were just there to talk about what they wanted to talk about. But out of that, this is so first, the rule of thumb is you can't do a good deal with a bad partner. And they were bad partners. Every day it got harder. I said, I don't want to do it. I hate them. I don't like them. They're cheating me. They're screwing me. They're lying behind my back. And then out of that comes good partners. So this is the rule. You can't do a good deal with a bad partner. So you move on. But out of that, out of every bad partnership comes great partnerships. So today we have Melissa and Tony, and we love doing this show. We get better, you get better, and all that. So that's kind of how you know. And happy 3 years of doing this, right?
Yes, absolutely. And our CEO and our president, great partners now. They came out of a bad partnership, and now we work really well together. Things move, things happen. We're productive, we're creative. That's one way you know a good partner. I'm going to say one other thing because you took the words right out of my mouth, Robert, is trust your gut. I mean, the biggest mistakes I've made is when I don't trust my gut. And here's what's happened sometimes is we have a partner and he or she does something and it's a red flag. And I go, oh, no, that's not important. No, I'm going to ignore that because that's just a one time. But if I had paid attention to those red flags and trusted my gut, it would have been a different story. So trust that gut because it knows, you know if it's a good partner or a bad partner.
Yeah. The reason people have eating addictions is they're trying to stuff that feeling in their stomach. That's really what it's about. They got a bad feeling about something. So I don't know the name of the receptors and all that. I was talking to my doctor about it yesterday. He says, you're correct. He says, there are more brain cells actually in the gut area than because the brain does a different function than the gut area. Okay? So you'll know in your gut. Melissa, next question, please.
Our next question comes from Marcelo in San Antonio, Texas. Favorite book, Cash Flow Quadrant. Once money is invested in assets and cash flow is generated from the assets, how do we pay ourselves from those assets?
I'm really glad you asked that question. What it could be wrong, but what that tells me is you're desperate for money. You mean you want that money bad. Is your gut is saying, give me that money. I want to spend it. I want to go shopping and all this stuff, That's what it shows me. You really can never need that money. There's an addiction to money as there's addiction to sex, as there's addiction to alcohol and to food. So that was a hard addiction for Kim and I to get over because as the cash flow kept coming out, financial planners will tell you this, you got to reinvest it. So Kim and I just kept reinvesting. Meanwhile, in our quote-unquote jobs, we survived off of our jobs. So our jobs or our work provided our paycheck, but we left the asset column alone to grow. And today, the same thing is true, right?
Yeah, well, that's our rule. Our rule is once a dollar goes into the asset column, it stays in the asset column. And we kept reinvesting it. Maybe we sell an asset, but we buy another asset with that money. And it wasn't until, I don't know how many years, the thought never even occurred to me to pay ourselves out of that.
No.
That came from someplace else. That was just to be reinvested. Eventually, that cash flow is so great and so abundant that maybe then we can buy our liabilities out of the cash flow from the assets. But
right.
That's way down the road.
So I appreciate the question simply because that's what the question most people, when can I spend the money? Their guts are going crazy. That's what Blair talks about, the little voice mastery. Now, we do spend our cash flow, but that's a science that we talked to Tom Wheelwright about because Tom has to tell us how to exit out of the asset column. But most people don't even, they get in $26 and they spend 25 of it in cash flow. And they wonder why they're broke because there's not growing on them. Next question, Melissa.
Our next question comes from Judy in Las Vegas. Favorite book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. She says, I know study is important, but I'm finding I can't get my friends or family to ever join me. How can I convince them that this is important, not just to my success, but to theirs as well?
Well, welcome to the club.
Yeah, no kidding. Hey, Judy.
Well, the hardest people to talk to are friends and family.
Yeah.
But what you're really talking about here is you're changing and they're not. You see, and the whole thing here is don't teach pigs to sing because it wastes your time and annoys the pig. And that's what Kim was saying, is sometimes you need to move on from your advisors and friends and all this. The big question for today's program is, who are you spending time with? The most important thing for your success is your social network. Who are your friends and family? So Kim and I are always looking for, as we progress, we have to have people that are progressing with us. So our advisors, Tom, Blair, Kenny, Andy, Tom, we get together twice a year to study. There are people who will not study. They're not my friends. I don't hang out with them. I don't invest my money with them because it's a waste of time. Because eventually their little mind will drag you down anyway. So I hang out with my closest friends, study, we invest together, we take advice from each other, and we're constantly learning. That's what you're looking for. That's what I mean. That's this whole program is about, is who are your advisors? Is it a financial planner making $45,000 a year? That's not good advice there from my point of view. Or it might be good for you if you're only making $10,000 a year. But if you want to get to the multi-million-dollar stage, your job and your task is to keep going through people, looking for the people that best fit who you are and who you want to become. Any comments?
I would say to Judy, I think it's somewhat of a trait of women to want to include their friends and family in what they're doing. And I'm going to say, Judy, stop it. Stop. I mean, my family, I don't study with my family. I don't read books with my family.
Oh, God.
They're not interested. They're not like-minded. They don't have similar goals and aspirations. So that's why we have our advisors. I want to hang out with people who have similar values, similar goals, driving for their dreams, all of that, who want to study, who want to learn, who want to grow, and want to get better.
So our advisors are not self-employed people. Most entrepreneurs are self-employed. They're basically one-man bands. And this whole show is, I don't want to hang out with people who are one-man bands.